host.
Oh, very cool.
Okay. All right. So now you should be able to have access rights to be able to share your screen. I don't think I have to do a co-host for your note taker, but I've not had to do that yet.
No, that's fine. That's just like a separate guest. If you're okay, that helps me.
Sure.
Yeah, in lots of different ways on the back end, but I appreciate that. So thank you so much. So Amy, what's your role in the PPSIG?
I'm on the board. I'm actually the treasurer. And then for some reason I ended up being kind of our tech person by default. I'm not the most techie person, but I've been able to figure out, when COVID hit, we had to do that quick pivot and get all of our stuff online for a conference. And so it was a little interesting. So I do tend to be the one here kind of in the background, just making sure everything goes smoothly.
Right.
And then just so you know, we will be recording this for our members as well, if you're okay with that.
Of course. That's great.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's so wonderful. So you helped set up my video at the conference back a few months ago, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I personally can't thank you enough for doing that. And,
you bet.
Oh my goodness. I feel so honored that anyway, that means a lot. You did that.
You bet. No problems. So do you want to try to test your screen to see if what you're using will show up?
Yeah, for sure. In terms of handouts, I have one, PowerPoints, I have one, but typically what I have found historically is that a lot of times people spend so much time looking at my handout, but I'll test it anyway. I've got a few that I've got pulled up. If what I do is I kind of gauge the room. And then if it goes in a certain direction and I have a handout information, then I share screen. So I'll check it real quick. Let's see.
Okay.
Do you see my drive with all the different?
Yes. Yep, it's there.
All right. So this might be one that we touch base on. Okay, great. Very cool. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Love that. I'm a big fan of Google Meet, by the way. I'm glad you're using it. I'm a big fan of it.
Well, we started, obviously, like I said, truly with COVID. We had our annual spring conference. It was March 13th. It was literally the day that things were shutting down, and we had to pivot. And it was like we were doing Facebook Live, which was a F show, And then, then we realized, we kind of need something in place. So we went to Zoom, and I just can't believe how expensive Zoom is when you start looking at something like Google Meet. And so we made this switch the last year, 2023. We went to Google Meet, and we've been extremely happy with it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, me too. I've had such a fun time with that because I don't know, Google Meet, with Zoom, there's all these restrictions. The only thing that I don't like about Google Meet is the screen share, because I can't be both places. So I find myself doing one versus the other.
Yes.
So yeah,
that is tough.
But apart from that, everything else is easier. Like, you don't have to have one person assigned to it. Everyone can kind of jump in and out as they need to.
Right. Well, and I will say the other thing that I kind of miss with Zoom was when we were doing webinars, like this, I could actually have people register beforehand. And so the analytics, I could see like how many people we'd expect to come. And that I do kind of miss. So hi, Megan.
That's true. Hello. Megan, what an honor to finally get to put a face and a name together.
Yes. Nice to see you. I was panicking. I was on another Google thing. I clicked the link, but then I realized last time I was on a meeting was at my sister's, and I was on her thing. And anyway, I was like, where is everybody?
Well, you're in the right place. It sounds like we're all finally together. And how's your day going, Megan?
Pretty good. I mean, it's pretty miserable here. Imagine that rain in Western Washington, but it's like pouring and feels like we're back in like November or something instead of, coming into the weekend.
It's so funny how opposite but similar our situation is, because we're breaking 100 degrees here already. So like the weather couldn't be more different, but the emotional impact's the same. We're just like, oh no, like just here we are again.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So Will, you're in Arizona Are you
Gilbert.
in Sholo or where do you live?
So I live in Gilbert, which is like a Phoenix suburb, but I do have a cabin up in Sholo, which is 3 hours northeast of here, which is like, if you're going to live in Arizona, like having an outlet like that is huge. You have to have a pool, in my opinion, and you have to have somewhere you can go where you can just get out of the heat. So that's one of my favorite places on earth. No kidding, is that cabin.
Nice.
It is just such a, I think it on Airbnb, I think it's been acknowledged as one of the top, if not the top rental for that area. We usually rent it like at a higher price, so we don't have so much volume of people. So it
Right.
usually, you know, those individuals who come in at the higher volume are usually a lot more grateful and like leave better reviews anyway. So, but yeah,
Yeah, no,
I
it
love
looks great. I'm excited. We just are trying to think of when because we want to drive down there and take our time, and we're just trying to think of when we're going to go. So
Yeah. Just keep me posted, as you know. Just look at the calendar, send me dates. We'll get, whenever you're ready, we'll get you in there, and it'll be so fun. I'm so excited and grateful that you signed up for that.
yeah, Amy, I bought his stay at his cabin at the pack auction.
Oh, okay. I kind of
Yeah.
figured that's what you were talking about. So
Yeah.
so now people are kind of wanting to start getting in.
Yeah.
Are
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of mute myself, turn everything off.
Okay.
I'll just be admitting. And then Megan, I think right at noon we'll just let
We'll
people
just get going?
go. Yeah.
Okay.
All righty.
Very cool. Well, interesting. So Megan, I'm assuming you have a practice as well?
Well, I actually am retired. So
Oh,
I did for a little over 10 years, and I sold, and then I partnered, with a new company for a couple of years, and then I retired. And, so I get bored and I kind of debate, and I'm still on this board, but yeah, I kind of debate what steps are next.
I think that's great. Entrepreneurs like us, it's really hard for us not to be doing something. Like,
Yeah.
I fully have committed that I am going to probably always be working. And it's so funny because I don't know if I'm just used to it, but I'm at a point now where I used to dread it, especially when I had my practice. There was moments of just intense, horrible dread.
Yeah.
But with what I'm doing now, I don't really feel that same degree. And so I feel like I'm going to be building a path where I'll be working a little bit in something always. I don't know. And then you and I both worked with retirees. I'm sure you had that experience of people who were done at like really young, like 60.
Mhm.
And like 10, 20 years later, they're just horrible to be around.
Right.
Like, they're just so upset with the world. I'm like, oh. And then I'd work with like an 80-year-old who had to work, and they're pretty like amazing. Like they were young in their thoughts. And so I like that you and I will probably always be doing a little something,
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want me to let people in when they come in? I don't know if you see that. You do. Okay,
I'm not seeing that. So yeah, if you
Amy's
can,
I'm doing it. Yeah.
okay. And then I'll wait till noon, and then I'll start introduction, and we'll get rolling.
I love it. I'm so excited. I love this topic. This is a fun one.
Yeah, a needed one right now, right?
Totally. I think that's why I enjoy it, is because right now there's just very little information on recruiting talent. And so when you have something to share that's useful, it makes you feel like you did something with your day. Like, oh
Definitely.
yeah, here's some things you can do and, actually make an impact in the recruiting space. Because like right now, everyone's struggling with it. And it's getting harder and harder for most people too, right? Like the things are just changing over time. So yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys thinking of me, honestly. Like I was really honored to have be invited to talk to this group. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, well, it's nice to have you live. They kind of got introduced to you with the recorded sessions, which was helpful to have, but it'll be nice to have you live.
Thank you. Interesting, before we start, I actually just came back last month from Arkansas, where I spoke to a group of PT owners similar to your organization for 2 full days. I had 2 6-hour days where I trained them on building out recruiting systems for PT. So if we don't cover a lot, if there's information that they still want on the back end, I can support them in lots of different ways that will help you guys get the PTs. And speaking of which, Tucker, what's going on, man? Look at you shaving, or more shaven.
Turn back a little bit. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing so much better now that I get to see you. How you been?
Oh, good. Just busy. I saw you're on this call, so I was like, I need to make it here.
Oh man, that means a lot to me. And now I'm actually a little bit nervous. We're going to say that. Let's keep those standards like.
I love the pressure.
Let's make it a pretty low key. I'm just kidding. Dude, that's so great. So, how's your family?
Good. Kids are just a little bigger and a little sassier, and
Sounds like a healthy thing. Good for you.
oh, yeah.
Well, it's 12, so I'll go ahead and we'll get started, and we might have some more filter in, but thanks everybody for coming. And I want to introduce, we're excited here today to have Will Humphreys here. And if any of you were at the Chelan conference, we did get to have Will at least kind of some virtual answers to our panel on the virtual front desk. And this time we actually have him live, so you can actually follow up with questions at the end. So Will is the founder of the Healthcare Business Academy. He is a serial entrepreneur, healthcare provider, speaker, and author. At 17, he fell off of a mountain, breaking both arms and legs. His exposure to the medical field led him to become a physical therapist. Later, he became a private practice owner and built a company to multiple locations prior to exiting at 3 times the national average. Today, he teaches others the lessons he learned from decades of practice and hundreds of interviews, hires, and fires. His greatest joy is his wife of 20 years and 4 sons. So welcome, Will, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Meg. And it is such an honor, guys, to be here. Thank you, all of you, for taking time out of your crazy busy day to learn about this thing called talent acquisition. I'm always honored to see leaders taking time to like invest in themselves, because most people don't really. Like, and look, I there's no judgment on that, because heaven knows I've been in a place where I could only do a little bit here and there. But I want you to know that I've prepared for this in a way that I recognize that your time is super sacred and valuable. And you're giving up a lot of other things that you could be doing in effort to be here. So for me, I look at that as like a serious responsibility that I don't take lightly. So I'm really excited to have you guys here. And I like to do it a little bit interactive. You don't have to, like if you're just trying to fit this in while you're throwing food down your mouth, I totally get it. But you're welcome to turn on your camera if you want. I really want if you have any point, if you have questions, you can either just turn on your camera, which will cue me that you want to ask a question, or you can hit that hand button that you'll see at the bottom there. That will tell me that you have a question. Don't worry about interrupting me. The more you guys put into this, the better it is. So yeah, and if you're just sitting back and learning, I respect that as well. So right now, what I'd love to do is take a quick pulse check with everybody to see how their current PT hiring or OT, depending on who you are, what your current provider hiring, how hard it is. 0 is like super easy, and 10 would be super hard. Would you guys, if you can put that in the chat, I'd love to see where you guys are in that journey. The chat button, by the way, is that little paragraph button you'll see on the right-hand side, lower right-hand side. It looks like a bubble that has like speaking. You click on that, you can put that in there. Type that in as I tell you my background, and then we'll get right into it. So Tucker's about a 7, performance a 9. Love that. So guys, I'm a physical therapist. Thank you, Mark, for 9. I'm a physical therapist. As Megan beautifully introduced me, I had a mountain climbing accident. I'm a super passionate PT because of my therapist, Connie Clemens, who stood me up for the first time and cheered me on until I could walk again. I broke 21 bones in that mountain climbing accident, and just wanted to commit the rest of my life to helping people overcome pain and limitation. And I never, ever thought I'd be in this position. But what I've learned is I actually feel like I'm doing the same thing now that I did back then as a PT, which is to help people overcome. We have a 7, PTs 9, OTs 1. Wow. So really easy for Allison to hire OTs, more challenging for the PT side. And so when I started my PT journey, it was in 2003 that I opened my first location in Florence, Arizona. And guys, let me just tell you like what that looked like. Florence is halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, in the middle of the desert, like middle. And it's a small town, 5,000 people, 10,000 people if you include the people who are incarcerated. There's 18 prisons in Florence, Arizona. 18. So a lot of my clientele were convicts, officers, guards at the prison, and then families of those people who were behind bars. And there was a ton of business to be had. Oh, OT is super hard. Sorry. Yeah, I got you. Allison. So anyway, why did I start there? Well, I'm from El Paso, Texas. I speak Spanish fluently. There was no jobs in 2000, if you guys remember those days. PT jobs are hard to come by. I found a job in Phoenix being bilingual, and then I found this area where it's mostly Spanish speaking in the middle of the desert. So I started a practice because that was always my dream. And I opened my practice doors, and guys, new patients just flooded in because there was no one else around. And I filled up in like weeks and immediately started to go higher. Oh, that's when the pain began. Hiring was so challenging for me. I remember the first guy I hired, let's call him Jose, because his name was Jose. And Jose came, I had to pay him this huge amount of money that I didn't think I could afford. I brought him on. It took weeks and weeks of me, finding Jose, training Jose. He got to a point where he was seeing about 40 visits a week, which we were seeing 50 to 60. So he was never quite producing exactly what I wanted him to. But honestly, I was just so thrilled to find a PT. And then I'll never forget this. This was like 6 months in after all that work. It was a Friday night. I'm getting ready to go to dinner with my wife. It'd been a long week, but it'd been okay because I had some help. And I checked my email before I go to dinner. And it was, the title in the subject line was resignation. And it was Jose saying, "Hey, Will, hope you're doing well. I found a job closer to Phoenix, to my home. I'm putting in my 2-week notice." And I just remember staring at that like, you got to be kidding me. That's how all that work, and that's how easy it is to have someone leave. And so it became this like moment where like my wife during the dinner, she was just like, "Hey, what happened?" I shared with her, and it ruined the evening minimally, right? Have you guys ever had that where something bad happened at your office and then like you're just not fully present with your spouse or kids or family? Like it's just in the back of your mind eating at you the whole time. Remember how fake I mean, for me, I was trying to be as happy as I could. I didn't want that to like weigh things down, but it was heavy, and it was so heavy. And I remember when Jose finally left thinking, how am I going to figure this out? And so I started getting coaching. And this is the beginning of what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, because what we're going to talk about today is how to stand out and actually attract physical therapists to join your practices. And so I wanted to give you guys my background so that you understand that I know what the pain is and I understand the challenge of it. And it was something I struggled with for years until I started getting coaching and learning information. And so I found this coach. This one coach was really powerful. He was the head recruiter. First of all, I couldn't find anything in physical therapy or medical. So I found this guy who's willing to coach on how to recruit people in any industry, but he himself was a recruiter for an oil rig company. So what he had to do when he was working full-time was convince people to go live out in the ocean for 6 months. And 5% of those people never came home. So, I mean, it paid really well, but like that was the guy who was coaching me. And he said something to me that I hope is going to resonate with you guys. He took a study of me and my practice, and he told me, he's like, "Hey, Will," he goes, "you're actually really good at recruiting." And I was like, no, I'm not. I've been sending out lots of LinkedIn and Indeed ads. I am trying to get student rotations through my practice. I am doing all the things that you're supposed to do, and no one's even biting because they have to leave Florence. And then literally there's like Florence or leave Phoenix or Tucson. And guys, it's Indian reservation around it. So like it's a 45 to an hour drive through nothing to get to Florence is where my practice was. And I'm drowning in patients. And I'm like, man, how can you say that I'm not bad at recruiting? I have 0 results. He goes, no, he goes, when you do work, when you talk to people, you do pretty good. You just don't have a lot of leads. He goes, what you stink at is marketing. And that kind of like lit something in my mind. Is like, oh. And guys, I have been coaching PTs for years now. I have coached from rural Alaska to large companies in New York that have over 100 PTs. I've coached like their team of recruiters. I've learned that most PT practice owners are actually really good at recruiting. And here's how you know. If you're a good recruiter, here's how you know. If your patients love you and tend to come more often than your team members. We don't say staff, by the way. The reason I'm avoiding that word staff is because staff is an infection. So we have team members, not staff. So, your PTs that work with you, like if you find that your patients love you and they bring you food, you're amazing at sales. And that's what recruiting is. It's sales. But you can't do sales without marketing. So if any of you who are listening have patients that follow, or if you've kind of noticed that like when you finally get a PT in the door that you tend to do pretty good, maybe it's a little competitive, but like you at least make it like they have to think about it, then what we're going to talk about is perfect for you. And if you have zero, like if you're thinking, man, I'm not even good at that, don't worry. Don't worry. There's things that we're going to talk about today that are going to absolutely help you. But I will tell you that when I learned how to do this successfully, there's a lot of things that occurred to me. Number one, it occurred to me once I started hiring people with the help of this coach in particular, one of the biggest realizations I've ever had as a practice owner in my life, like this is one of the biggest lessons of my professional world, is that learning how to attract and retain talent isn't an important thing to learn. It is the most important thing to learn. And I want you to think about that. What would your practice look like if you had a bench of providers that wanted to work with you and they were just waiting for you to call their name? What would you do with your practice? If you can put that in the chat, what would that look like for you? What would you do differently? If you're going to grow, what would that growth look like? Would you open multiple locations? Just kind of put it out there in the universe, because that's part of how we're going to talk about recruiting. But think about it. If you know how to attract and retain talent, you can solve any problem without you being the solution. So from marketing, if you have a medical billing problem, but you know how to recruit really well, you can solve it with the right biller. If you have a problem in your, of course, operations, you can hire for that. But even if you wanted someone else to run your company, you can hire a CEO, which, by the way, I did. When I sold my practice, they wanted me to be the CEO. And I told them, no, I wasn't the right fit. I wasn't honestly like ready for that. But we went and I helped find this guy named Steve DePaula, who's this amazing CEO. And so we don't have to, if anything, we don't have to have the skill set of the people we're hiring for. We just have to know these principles and techniques that we're going to talk about today. Because when we know how to hire people, there's nothing we can't do. There's no freedom we can't create. And so I want you guys to remember this as well. This is another key takeaway from today's call, is that the number one job of a leader is to make more leaders. Fast forward, and then we're going to get into the actual technical stuff. Fast forward. So I end up going from my one location in the middle of nowhere, Florence, Arizona. I get this coaching. I start getting this aha that, like, first of all, anyone, I believe, it can be a powerful recruiter and make hiring PTs easy. I really believe that, by the way, when we learn the right skills. But then number two, this idea that like my patient care is important, but the team that I build is actually the most important thing that I do. So we started expanding to 2 locations, then 3 locations, and I had bumps along the way, but eventually we got to 5 locations. So, and at that point, I'm in the middle of nowhere still. I'm purposely selecting cities that are in the middle of nowhere because with a lot of help, I developed a value proposition where people were willing to wait to go work in the middle of the desert for me at a reasonable price. And so this is the best news of all. There's two great pieces of news. Number one, if I can do it, literally anyone else can. That's great news. Number one. I had a coach once tell me that he didn't think I was naturally good at hardly anything other than being coachable and trainable. And I've learned that's a great skill set. So I'm proud of that. But number two is that the only thing we have to do to totally stand out from the rest of the market is be just 1% different. Just 1% different. So like when you're recruiting, is this you? You don't have to put it in the chat, but most PTs, when they're recruiting, because we haven't been taught formally, what we do when we have a need is we wait. First of all, we usually wait for someone to resign before we start looking. Mistake number one. Number two, when we are recruiting, we usually reach out to the universities, try to see if there's a job fair we can do. Mostly we're just posting job ads up on the boards. We might pay through like our national or state organizations, which are very good ideas, but that's pretty much the entire recruiting strategy. Is that most of you? And if it is, don't feel bad, because that is most of the country. And the great news about that is that it leaves this huge market for people who are willing to stand out and be different, to make a huge impact around recruiting. So real quick, guys, as you're listening to this, if you can you please put in the chat, what are some of your successful actions that you've had for recruiting? Where do you get most of your people now? You can put, universities, if job ads are working for you, hey, power to you. But I just would love to see in the chat what many of you might be doing to get, leads. So Tucker mentioned Indeed. Great. That's wonderful. Clinical internships, hiring those students afterwards. That is such a great, powerful thing. If people aren't doing that, obviously that's a wonderful technique. Previous students or aides. Oh, that's a great one. So people, Monty, that have come into your business, that have worked with you, they develop that trust, and then later they come back. I love that. All right. So let's get right into it. To stand out and be different, there's a couple of core concepts I want to tackle first. Oh, Allison, universities, student interns, professional groups, networking, special interest groups, etc. There's a commonality in almost all of those that I want to highlight. And there's really, when you boil down developing a bench of physical therapists, not just hiring for one singular need, but as an owner of a company with the goal of building a legacy, we tend to realize that it all boils down to one word, and that's relationships. Recruiting, how are you going to stand out? If you walk away from with one tidbit today, is that the way you're going to stand out is through the relationships that you create. I want you to think about that. And we're going to get into why there's challenges around it. Last part of my story, I'm selling my business in 2017 and 2018. I have 5 locations. I'm working less than 10 hours a week. And the reason I'm selling is because I have been called, I feel called to help PT owners. I've always had that strong sense since I started figuring things out with the help of coaching. And I'm selling my business because my great A team wanted to go to like 20 locations, and that wasn't going to work for me. I didn't want to do that. So I sell my business, and then the biggest lesson of all time hits me, which is that my legacy of my work isn't my patient care, but it was the team that I built. When I get with other business owners in and out of physical therapy who have sold their businesses, what we talk about is our old teams. And that's the part we miss. And for years, I didn't like my team. Back in those early days when I was struggling, guys like Jose that I blamed for all my pain. So the reason I'm sharing all this is because the first problem that I face when I'm working with somebody new on recruiting is the mindset piece. But at the end of the day, your secret sauce is the way that you hold relationships. No one holds relationships the way that you do. And so we're going to talk about how to nourish your individual capabilities of developing relationships to build your network. And when I coach, that's like the core foundational piece, is that your network is your net worth. And I love Allison's summary there at the end, because essentially what she's talking about is that she's going to these groups where she's developing this network. And that how we hold and manage those relationships is the secret sauce of standing out and building not just like a hire, but a long-term bench. So let's talk about mindset. Most of the people that I work with really struggle in developing a growth mindset around recruiting. And here's why. Because of guys like Jose. All of you are here as powerful leaders. You wouldn't be on a call in the middle of a Tuesday if you weren't in the top % of PT owners, OT owners in the country. And I'm not trying to flatter you, that's legitimately accurate, because the vast majority of our $50 billion industry are mom pa locations where they're treating so much, there's no way that they'd be able to break away for this long. So you're already ahead of the game. But what I've learned is that for you guys to get to where you are, and I get it, you've been invalidated repeatedly. I always tell people no one gets fired more than a practice owner. We fire people occasionally, but when people quit us, we get fired, and it hurts and it's invalidating. So first of all, we get incredibly invalidated. Number 2, there's legitimate challenge in hiring right now. Like, you guys know the stats. There's more PTs leaving than entering the profession. The need for our profession is scaling at a rapid rate. like between the almost like insurmountable vision of having to hire in that market combined with our previous losses, when I talk to PTs, this is what I commonly hear. I can't hire PTs. It's too hard. I can't. And what's hard about that, even though I understand why they feel that way, and if this is you, I just want you to hear me like you're really hearing me, is that as much as that I can empathize with that feeling, that's a mindset that will never produce results. Because in that mindset, we become needy. And I've hired so many bad fits from being needy. I used to call it the fogged mirror rule. If people fogged a mirror, I hired them. Like just if they were willing to drive out to Florence. And I had this story in my head about why would someone drive 45 minutes to an hour to come work in the middle of the desert where there's nothing to do, nothing to see. And so when I put my ad together or when I talked to PTs, I showed up from that place. And so you might be thinking, yeah, Will, but I want to hear like the techniques of how to like stand out. I'm telling you, as ethereal as that might feel, the first thing I always work on with people is the way that they think about their business and how they approach it, because I can show you guys all the techniques in the world, and there are many. There's so many that it will blow your mind in a way that gives me hope. But none of them are going to work if we approach our recruiting from a place of like, why would someone come work for me? You know, we say it differently, but that's the end game message I hear from most people. And so what I ask you to do before we go into some of the more detailed elements is just consider the fact, the reality that someone would be lucky to work for you, no matter what your previous experience has been. And I can say that confidently without knowing you. I see a bunch of names I don't know. But the reason I can say that confidently is because, again, you represent a very small percentage of people who are here taking time to learn how to better your business and yourselves as leaders. And again, the most amazing thing is, because you're willing to take that time, you will get better at it. Anyone can learn it. Anyone can. So let's be careful with our language. Number one, instead of saying it's hard, I can't do it, change it to I currently struggle with. I'm currently struggling with recruiting, but I can figure it out because I met this guy named Will. If he can do it, anyone can. Like, you can figure it out. With that kind of mindset, then you approach things a little bit differently. Another major way you can stand out is from that place. If you feel like someone would be lucky to work with you, then you approach each call with not being a seller, like someone's selling, like, come on, come work for me, please. You become a coach. You become something who all of you are naturally really good at if you have patients that like working with you. Our job isn't to hire people when we interview them. Kind of a weird thing to say, right? What is our job? Our job is to help people find where they're meant to go. And when we approach our job interviews, our job ad from that perspective, what we're saying is, I am someone that you would want to work for because my interest lies in you. Look, recruiting is a lot like dating. Has anyone here ever dated someone who was needy? You know, what did that feel like? We accidentally come across that way as business owners when we approach it from a place of like, how do I get them to say yes? The bigger question is, how can I help them find their home? When I was surveyed later, as a quick side note, when I sold my practice, I stayed on and was solely responsible for recruiting for 26 locations by myself. And I never had more than one clinical position open after I learned these and applied these techniques over years. And again, it wasn't hard. But the number one thing I surveyed my people, I said, in my interview, what was it that I said or did that really made an impact on you? And it was unanimous. People said, when I would say to them, hey, listen, my job as an owner is to help you find your next job, whether it's with me or somebody else. And that's what I'm here to do in the interview, is to help see where you should go to be the most successful. And you can count on me recommending a different direction if I'm not the best fit. But you can also count on me recommending my company if I believe we are the best fit for you. See that difference in mentality? I become more of the buyer than the seller in that case, because and I am protecting myself. I had to get burned by bad hires enough to where I had to like really own that language. But it's true, to stand out in that job interview, it was like, all right, let's find out where you're meant to go. And people unanimously said that's what attracted us to working with you, because we really wanted to be around someone who was truly looking out for our best interests. And it showed, because I was willing to take a hit for it. Isn't that interesting? People, LinkedIn put out, I have slides for all this. I just like going off the cuff, but like there's, LinkedIn has this one study, and it showed that 88% of people leave a job because they don't see a future in it, which really means they don't connect with the owner or a leader. It doesn't have to be the owner. It can be a leader with enough to see how their working in the company is going to produce a future for them. That's very useful information from a recruiting perspective, because when we are coaches with people, we are coaching them to their future. And so by helping them understand what they should be looking for, it opens the door for them to want to work with us. So it's the number one reason why people leave their profession, quit their employer, but it's also the number one tool we can use as coaches to help attract them, is by really looking out for their best interests. And I've avoided some really bad hires that were willing to work with me, but I could tell this person really wanted to go into neurology, but just didn't have the courage. Like I identified people who, like, oh, that's a peds therapist. The only reason they're looking for me is because they can't find a job elsewhere. Well, I don't want to set that up, because when we have someone that we hire that we lose in a year, they've done the math on this. It's 3 times their salary is what it costs us. So at $70,000, that's $210,000 if we mistakenly hire someone. So I'm not saying that from a place of like scaring anyone from like, making hires, but it is motivation when you're in that interview to be the coach and to protect ourselves by looking out for their best interest and ours, which immediately shifts our energy and allows us to become more of that buyer versus the seller. So we've talked a lot about mindset. First of all, any questions on that? Anyone disagree? On board? Silence is acceptance. Again, for those of you who joined later, I want you guys to feel free to jump in and ask questions. I'm going to leave about 10 to 15 minutes of questions here. So here's a couple of things. Now we're going to get into the actual techniques of how to stand out and be different. First of all, let's talk about job ads. So job ads, when we are putting out job ads, right now there's over 70,000. I just looked it up. There's over 70,000 openings for physical therapists in the country right now on LinkedIn. And here's the good news, is that almost all of them are identical. So if this sounds like your job ad, please don't take it personal. Look at it as an opportunity to change. But most job ads look like, come work for Will Physical Therapy, where we focus on quality care and the team experience. We're looking for an energetic, hardworking physical therapist who wants to grow with us. Here's our benefits. Here's our offer. Please contact us if you're interested. That is 99.9% of the job ads out there. Here's what they hear. First of all, when it comes to the job ad, they're hearing how great the company is, which starts to sound like white noise after a while. And it's not really targeting anything specific. Quality care is one of the most commonly used phrases in the job ad, and it literally carries zero significance, because they wouldn't even be looking at you if they assumed there would be no quality of care of the practice. When they hear someone wanting to grow with their practice, what they hear is a mill. They hear someone, and we kind of put it that way because we found, of course, as PT owners, that we do need someone who's wanting to work hard, but what they hear is that they're going to be overworked. So how do we stand out? First and foremost, the language of a job ad should always begin in the you language, not in the me language. So I want you to think of your job ad in the following. The purpose of the first 2 sentences of your job ad is to hook them into reading the rest of the ad. You want to have some language that makes it feel like you're speaking directly to them. And the reason you're able to do this is because you spend time thinking about your ideal hire. Maybe you've heard the term avatar before, but an avatar is a marketing term to describe your ideal client. So you can use that to determine your ideal patient, which I highly recommend. You can also use that to create your ideal PT to join your company. So an easy way to kind of cut the corner on developing your avatar is to look at anyone you've ever worked with that you loved. If you've ever worked with someone that you love so much, you can just describe them. Like if you ever say that, like I could clone Mary. Mary's the best. I could clone her. I'd have all my problems solved. Then Mary's your avatar. You want to look at her age, her interests, her hobbies, her hopes, her fears, her dreams. And we want to create a job ad that speaks to Mary. And you start off with a question because it engages the frontal lobe of the brain, which immediately stands out. And it's in the you language. Let's pretend that your avatar is a new grad, that you want to hire someone who's just now coming out of school because you like to mold them. Maybe you have a really powerful mentorship program. Maybe you just love the balance of the openness in their starting salaries, whatever that is. Look at this question as a hook for your job ad. Are you a physical therapist who wants to become the best you can while participating in a company that helps you maintain work-life balance? Question mark. Immediately, and that's okay, that wasn't the greatest, but like immediately I'm speaking to someone specifically because they're like, yeah, that's me. I once helped a company who was hiring physical therapists to do electrodiagnostics, EMGs and ultrasounds. Very different personality than an outpatient physical therapist. And so these people are very calculated. They're not outgoing. And so their hook was something along the lines of like, are you wanting to become a technical master of your skill set without the overwhelming pressure of having to work with people every second of the day? Groups of people, I think it said. And that we started getting, and so what's interesting is that you might think, well, I'm reducing the number of people who are going to want to apply. And the point is, yes, our job ad, we want to polarize people. We want them to be like, yeah, that's not for me at all. That's a win. Anyone who's not our avatar who doesn't want to come apply saves us time and money. But here's the crazy thing is the avatar, when they see that job ad, they're like, holy cow. It's like the number one thing I get from clients and my own experience that's like the coolest compliment is when someone who's interviewing for a job goes, when I read your job ad, I thought you were talking directly to me. That means I stood out. So creating the job ad helps us stand out. The coaching mindset helps us stand out. Let's talk about lead generation now for the next 10 minutes. So where do we get leads? Well, that depends on where your avatar is. But remember this, is that recruiting is a constant effort over time. If you're on this call and you're like, Will, what's one thing that I can do to make a big difference in my recruiting? It would be this, to separate an hour per week to do nothing but recruit every week. And I mean, an hour is a lot of time when you're juggling 18 plates, but remember, no matter how important these other things are, there's literally nothing else that's more important. I stand by that. There's literally nothing more important. It's the number one purpose of a leader, to create more leaders. It's the legacy of our business when we're all said and done. And if we can get just 1% better each week at recruiting, you get to a threshold where you never have to worry about it again. I experienced that in a very difficult area to recruit for. And if I can do it, anyone can. So that 1 hour is sacred. And people usually don't set it apart because they either A, feel too invalidated from previous experience. I think a lot of us are carrying a lot of baggage around of just the emotional impact of having bad hires ruin things for us, all the dramatic conversations and firings. Oh my gosh, I mean, it's a lot. But you separate that time, you get 1% better, and then all of a sudden you'll experience what I did. And most of you have some degree of this where you have you have people on your team that you just love, right? Maybe you have most of your team that you love. But here's how you know who you need to hire for, by the way. So once you separate the hour, so like step number 2, besides the coaching mindset, you separate that hour per week. The first thing we want to look at is assessing our actual recruiting need. Because another thing that gets us in trouble when we're recruiting is that we oftentimes really we don't understand what we're recruiting for. It's like, okay, if I had one more PT, then I don't need to hire anymore. Here's how you know how many people you actually need to hire. We're going to do this activity as a group. Very kumbaya. I want you right now to think of everyone on your team, name by name, and I want you to ask yourself one question. I'll give you 1 minute to do this exercise. I want you to ask yourself this one question. Would I emphatically rehire this person. Emphatically. It's not yes, if, or yeah, I think. If there's any hesitation, that's a no. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to do with that information, but I'm going to give you, I'll give you 30 seconds just to think about it and just go person by person. Would I emphatically rehire that person? All right. So if it's a no, if it's a yes, congratulations. If it's a no, then you have one job: to coach them up and or out of the company. The same actions that make someone successful in our company are the same actions that we would use to fire someone. You know, we meet with them, we recognize the outlying points. There's a whole nother masterclass we could have on that. But the ultimate thing here is that when we're recruiting from a strategic perspective, we don't want to just hire for open positions. We want to hire for anything that's not a team of A players. For a lot of people, that can be a little bit overwhelming at first. But I will tell you that perspective, if you have an hour a week to apply, is going to make all the difference in your efforts. There's a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan. And it talks about how it's actually easier to do something bigger than smaller. So the amount of effort, time it would take to hire one person is actually harder than it is to hire multiple people, because when you're hiring multiple people, it forces us to think bigger. And when we think bigger, like a growth mindset, then we have the right actions that produce not just the hires we want, but a bench of people that are wanting to join our practice. And that's a different discussion we can go over someday. What happens when you are fully staffed? Most people, when they're fully staffed, they stop recruiting because they don't know what to do when people want to join. That's something that we can have another class on if you're interested, is what does that discussion look like to put them on the bench? We don't mislead people, but we never stop recruiting, ever, ever, ever. When we have a full team and we're 100% satisfied and they're all A players, that's the best time to really kick in our overdrive of recruiting. That was a big shift for me as well, to stand out. And here's why. I'm the best buyer when I don't even need to hire. So think about someone applying for a job and me meeting with them and saying, listen, Joyce, I am so excited to meet you. I got to be transparent from the beginning. All of our positions are currently filled. The reason that I'm hiring is because all of my growth is around who, not how. I build around people, not ideas. So I'm always looking for the next who so that I can build the next layer of this wonderful company. I love my current team and I'm not looking to replace anybody. What would you feel as someone who's hearing that message, right? Like, the most powerful recruiting we do is when we don't actually have to hire someone because we're in desperate need. So you create that hour, you assess what you actually need. You look at like your job ad, creating an avatar, creating a hook, those types of items. I have two gifts for everybody, just as a thank you for letting me come talk to you guys today. The first is anyone who wants, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Anyone who wants a free copy of the Bible of recruiting, I'll share a screen and show you what that looks like. It's a book called Who, the A Method for Hiring. Guys, this is the Bible. Jeff Smart is the son of Brandon Smart, who created the book Top Grading, and like their father's son, and they've been working in this space forever. And I'd be happy to send that to you. So I'll put my email. You guys reach out, just go, hey, I want a copy of the book. My virtual assistant will send that over to you guys. That book is where you start with that hour of day after you assess your team. I want you to read this book. It will go through so many of the different concepts that we're talking about here to help you stand out and really attract people. But once you're in that place, I want you to go back to the thing I said at the very beginning of this. We're almost out of time, so I need to turn it over to questions. But do you guys remember the one word I used to describe the power of recruiting, beginning with an R? Does anyone remember? Relationships, right? So when we realize our power to generate relationships changes how we stand out and actually get hires. So here's just an example of that. Let's say that you, after this class, you're like, yep, I'm changing my mindset. I'm going to read that book, Who. I'm going to study an hour a week. I'm going to go from needing a physical therapist, and it's hard, to wanting a physical therapist, and I'm struggling with it currently. Like that whole shift in mindset. And every hour you're just like learning and you're reading that book. I want you to imagine what it would look like if you really believed that you were somebody that someone would be lucky to work for. What kind of actions would you generate knowing that it's relationship based? Let's go back to that example of someone looking for a new grad. So university relationships. I had this is a true case study. One of my clients, when they started thinking this way, they said, Will, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I had been showing up for university job fairs. I had been looking for student rotations in my clinic. But then I realized if I really wanted to develop a relationship to make a difference, I needed to become a coach and a server to the university. So this person, watch out, got in their car and drove down to the university physically, unannounced, went to the front desk and said, hi, my name is so-and-so. I have been working with your students off and on for years. I wanted to come by and to say thank you and to learn about how I can better help you guys. Think about how many PT owners ever do that because they're in this scarcity mindset and just reacting and spinning 18 plates every day. What if you were the one that shows up? There's a power in presence. And that's why this is such a beautiful thing, is because what you'll find is that when you start attracting the right people that think higher of you, that you enjoy it more and it feels more impactful than patient care because you're helping other people through other people and your reach becomes bigger. So you show up at the university, this person showed up at the university and they were like, well, thank you. That means a lot to us. We sure appreciate it. She met with the program director. She met with the person in charge of clinical rotations. Sure enough, she got bumped up to the top. With the clinical director, she didn't ask for anything. She was just there to say thank you and how can I help you? So they asked for a couple of sponsorships, which she did. She showed up to those sponsorships. She ended up taking the program director out to lunch as a follow-up. They became friends. What do you think? You guys have all heard the phrase, it's who you know, not what you know. Like this person went on and started working their way into the university system as a guest speaker. That person built a bench. And I've seen it. I did it myself. That was my big secret. I'm going to give you guys as my last successful actions because there's so many. This is what I ended up doing in Arizona. There's no secret to it, guys. I did that same thing. I went to the universities. My avatar was a new grad that wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I developed time to go to the universities, get to know the decision makers, and really serve them. I wasn't trying to manipulate it to my advantage. I was legitimately just trying to serve them until they asked. We want to give until they ask us how they can help us. So I'd go to these universities. There's 4 in the Phoenix metro area. And almost immediately, guys, it didn't take long. They're like, well, why don't you come speak to our class about professional development? So I became the guy. I started doing this every quarter, 1 quarter in a different university, because no one else is doing this. There's like hundreds of PT practices. I'm this guy in the middle of Florence who's willing to drive an hour. They only have to drive 10 minutes, by the way, in some cases, but I'm driving an hour and a half to these universities. I'm showing up and teaching their students on how to develop the career of their dreams by learning how to interview employers. And it wasn't a manipulative tool to get them in my world, but I did have a call of action. And that call of action was sincerely meant to serve them. It was called a mock interview. And I found out later that was a big successful action. As I would say, if anyone wants to do a mock interview, I don't care. If you want to leave the state, I'll interview you and give you feedback on your interviewing skills. And then pretty soon over the years, it developed into me standing up on stage, in the classroom, I'd stand up on stage is how I call it. But I'd stand up in the classroom and say, who here wants to open a practice one day of their own? And 4 hands would shoot up and I'd go, you 4, I'm taking to lunch. Anyway, let's talk about how to find the career of your dreams. Because I knew who my avatar was. And I also built trust with my universities to where I could do that without overstepping, right? And it just snowballed. And I started creating this free this is just one way you can go. I created a free mastermind for any of the students whoever I took to lunch to stay in. And I was going to give them 1 hour a month of my time to answer any questions they wanted on how to start a practice. And most people in that group never worked for me. But the value I got from that group, I just stopped that group 3 months ago. And I haven't owned a practice in 6 years. Because why? I loved giving. It was so cool to teach them and to help them grow. And from that, I've had so many other doors open up. Our network is our net worth. Last thing I'll say. Oh, second to last thing. My oldest son came to me. He's like, hey, Dad, what's the one bit of advice you'd give me to be a successful owner? And I said, simple. Your network is your net worth. You guys just being here is the most successful action there is, because with people, you'll learn things like we're talking about today. That gives you an advantage over most other people, right? You're not in competition against each other. You're in collaboration. There's just very few people willing to take the time to do it. And so my last thing I'll share is that my last successful action was I found, kind of like one of the people who put in the comments, I found that the most willing to hear me were first-year students. So I would always speak to third and second years, offer rotations, mock interviews. Things shifted in my world with the day that I went to the first-year students and I started having like a pizza party to celebrate their end of their first year, and just started doing mock interviews with those men and women, because no one's even thinking about talking to them. And yeah, it's 2 years out, but if I found a rock star, which when you find a rock star, I was like, hey, I want to work with you. I want you to do a student rotation with me. And I think I'd even want to hire you if you keep going as good as you are. They get to go tell their friends, their family, someone wants to hire me already. And so they've already been programmed. I wouldn't say brainwashed, but they've already been programmed to thinking they're going to come work for me after their first year. And I had to deliver on my promises, which I had to do. So when they came to work, they were satisfied. But that's the whole point of this discussion, was to help you see what you currently can't see when you're in the thicket of the forest of owning a business, is that there's a huge opportunity to serve this other population of people who would be lucky to work for you, who would honestly think you're the greatest owner in the world. But we're too busy dealing with people that we're not as well aligned with in all the day-to-day. So just by taking the simple action of 1 hour a week and just focusing on recruiting, starting with that book, I am always here as a resource for all of you. And my last thank you to all of you is that I have an online course that teaches people how to hire PTs from beginning to end. It's a process. I will give everyone here, if you want, a month access to that for free. No obligations. I'm not going to hound you for sales on anything. I swear. I have zero interest of doing anything other than helping you. And if you'd like access to that, I'm happy to give you that access point so you can learn about these things that we've talked about in greater detail. There's template for job ad. There's all these different things. I'm happy to do that. So, all right. That's my huge thank you at the end. Do you guys, I want to make sure there was enough time for questions. I didn't leave enough, but what questions do you have?
So a quick clarification, Will, on you were recommending the book and saying, get your email address.
Or you can just, I don't have to give them my email. If they want to email you and you just tell me, I'll send it out to them.
Okay. And what do you need, like a physical address to get that to, or? Yeah. Okay.
Whatever you guys want. I want to be careful not to overstep. So I can put my email there. When they email me, my virtual assistant can follow up with people, get their physical addresses, and they can mail them a copy.
Okay.
If that's okay. I just want to be careful on that piece.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Are you cool if I do that?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Very good. Any specific questions, concerns, problems you're facing? I've got 10 minutes of 12 minutes. I can coach anyone if you have one problem you'd like some help with.
I kind of have a question.
Sure.
Indeed is not producing much right now, neither is LinkedIn. I'm wondering if I need to go to where people are, like you're saying, like the water cooler. Like, do I need to move to Facebook ads or Instagram ads or whatever instead? Because if people are looking for a job, they'll go to Indeed, but maybe they don't know that they're looking for another place. So.
Yeah, my experience with my clients on Facebook ads and Instagram ads have not been successful. Even when I've helped create the right ad for it, what has been a lot more successful is joining Facebook groups where PT students congregate. If you look for Facebook online, there's one, the Doctor of Physical Therapy Students for OT, PT, SLP. You ask to join, and then again, all recruiting is about trust within their relationship. My favorite business book of all time, bar none, is The Speed of Trust. It's so the idea being that, like, our goal isn't ever to try to get people convinced to come work for us as much as we want to create value for people. And then you'll just organically find individuals who resonate with what we're saying. So I would advise people in that hour, if you're looking for like a thing like that, Tucker, to where you go into the Facebook groups, you find questions regarding compensation, anything at all, down to like in that group, they have like, what shoes should I buy for my first job? Go in there and just make yourself known, answer questions. And then over time, you can reach out to people individually through the Facebook group and just say, hey, is there anything else I can help you with? And that way, you know, it gives you a chance online to kind of research that person. This next generation, they put a lot of their personal world out there, so you can get a sense if their values align with you. And then you can start building relationships that way. Yeah. For a single location, 2 locations, that's what I would recommend.
Okay. Yeah.
You're welcome to try the ads. And if it works, I'd love to hear from you. I've had probably a dozen clients through that.
Right. I've looked at some ATSs too, applicant tracking systems, and part of it appeals to me because maybe you can syndicate across many different mediums.
Sure.
But also I wonder if there's some value to what they put into like the Google SEO, because we have gotten applicants with unsponsored ads through Indeed, where people have started Googling different things, like what they're looking for in a job around our neighborhood, and they found us that way when we're on page like 97 on Indeed, you know. So I just wonder if there's a lot of value to like using Workable or Bamboo or all. There's a whole bunch of them out there, but
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
I have I was actually just with Chad Madden, if you guys are familiar with Breakthrough Marketing. I was at one of his events this last weekend, and we were talking about recruiting. And he said that that's actually one of the things that he did was leverage an ATS when he owned his practice back in its heyday. He still does, but he used an ATS to put ads out everywhere and do some SEO management. My biggest, and I think those are worthwhile endeavors depending on where you are. I know where you are, Tucker. Like you do really well. I mean, overall with your recruiting. So like something like that would be a worthwhile function for people who are just kind of like just posting ads and doing student rotations. I wouldn't ask them to start there. I'd have them start more on understanding recruiting from a 10,000 foot level and understand how to coach current people up so that they can fix the hole in their pitcher so the water doesn't keep draining out. Like it's one of the first things that we want to do is that while we're looking. But for someone like you, I think that would be a good worthwhile place to explore. Because I've seen that was just from my experience with Chad Madden, but he said it was very useful for him.
Do you have a particular ATS that you found the most user friendly? Meaning, like, my challenge is getting into our team to like adopt another thing. So that's my hesitation. But
remember, Tucker, everything we do is a pilot. Everything we do is hey guys, we're piloting an idea. We don't know if it's any good, but let's try it out. And here's why I want to pilot it. It's because we want to hire more PTs so that you guys have less work. So the ATS that I use, I don't know if it would be transferable because I'm using it for virtual assistants, but Zoho Recruiting, Zoho, Z-O-H-O, very widely used software. Their biggest software is the CRM or marketing component, like email marketing and that kind of stuff, but they've literally got 50 to 60 different products. They're all interconnected. We have found Zoho Recruiting to be an amazing ATS because for example, when we have the opposite problem with recruiting. Because the way that we operate with the virtual assistants, when we put one ad up, we'll get 150 responses. So we need an ATS to filter it. What you're looking for is a software that's going to post it multiple places and really like make it SEO worthy. And I don't use it for that function. So that's what I use, but I don't know if it's good for you.
So Will, for those of us that may not understand how ATS works, would you explain that? And then on top of that, is anyone finding that using AI is helping with recruiting in any form?
Thank you so much. I'll answer that first question, then pass it to everybody else in my experience with AI. So ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. I'm so sorry. You know how it is. You kind of get in your own world around certain acronyms. So if you don't know that, don't feel bad. That's very in my mind, that's more advanced on the talent acquisition side. The softwares function from a place of helping vet candidates like I was describing earlier, when I have 150 applicants for a virtual assistant position, it's looking for very specific criteria that I put into it. So so I don't even have to see probably about half of the resumes that come through because people are just throwing their resume out, right? So an ATS doesn't make a lot of sense for people in the physical therapy space because you don't have this huge influx of applicants coming in. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be on this call. Like if every time you posted a PT ad, you had 100 openings or applications, you'd be like, I don't, So Tucker is using it for something a little bit differently than that. But yeah, like when I was recruiting for 26 locations, at that point, I was using an ATS because I had an assistant that was hiring all the front desk roles, but I was personally hiring every PT, OT, PTA role by myself. And I had to have a system that just kept track of all the leads, where we were in the discussions, put reminders when it was time to do a call. So that's the ATS side of things. AI is phenomenal with recruiting for creating any materials that you need. But the key thing is to learn how to use AI through prompting it. Prompting AI is the skill set all of us want to focus on in the next generation for physical therapy. And so, for example, this generation of like 20 to 30-year-olds who are really adapting it quickly, I've spent some time seeing how they utilize it. It is absolutely mind-blowing. So, for example, and actually I'd be happy to share this. I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to share with you how to use ATI in a very niche way for recruiting. Let's go to new tab. Let's go to ChatGPT. All right. So you can use ChatGPT for any number of things, like write a job ad for a PT. But one of the things that I've created, and it will produce a job ad, but one of the things that I created, and I'm happy to share this with you guys at no cost, is I created something called the Rockstar Talent Finder widget. And here's how this works. So what I've done is I've uploaded everything from my online program, like all the templates, all the language of all the teachings into ChatGPT. And so when you say, write a job ad for a physical therapist, it does it with the technology that I teach. And I can share that link. It's free. You guys can jump on and use that whenever you want. Jump a job ad. Let's see what it says. Job ad for a physical therapist who is graduating next year from PT school and wants to have strong mentorship, good work-life balance, and a future of leadership. Okay, so see what it said. So what's cool about this, while it's printing it out, what's really cool about ChatGPT, and I want you, if you don't already know this, you already know this, I apologize, but the power lies in having it be a discussion. So like in my prompting, I look through this and then I want to direct it a little bit differently, right? Like, so it missed it. Admittedly, this missed the mark. It didn't have the U language at the beginning. So I would edit that and want to have it do a hook. Start the ad with a question to hook them into reading the rest. You can really say anything you want, and then it remembers the ad. And then, do you want to join a dynamic team that offers strong mentorship, a healthy work-life balance, and opportunities for future leadership? It didn't do it very attractively, but it's a strong hook. It's still a very strong hook. At Blank, we are see, this is part of my training. We are dedicated to providing exceptional physical therapies to our community. Our mission is to create unique. See, this is where you type in our mission is, our purpose, our values are, and then it will keep refining this for you in real time until it gets you where you want. And then you can type in things like create a mentorship program, and it takes my mentorship program and it layers it in there. So AI is huge for recruiting, and really because it allows you to create all these documents that are going to save you time and help you get there quicker. Everything from like your recruiting section on your website to anything else. But yeah, I appreciate that. Looks like we're out of time. So just while we're wrapping up, I just want to thank everyone again for being here. It's been an absolute privilege to be with you guys. I put my email in there if you want the book or access to that course, like that link to the AI widget, whatever. I'm happy to share. And yeah, thank you for taking time to be with me in this. It's been very special.
Thanks, Will. We really appreciate it. And we've got your email, and then people can reach out with any questions, and we have this recorded also to offer to people if they want to go back and see a section of it again. But we appreciate you coming. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Will.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. You guys too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.